You can be your own designers, you can be your own managers, everything, right? You don't need this dream of that a lot of people have of being discovered and scooped up, and then you're off to the races, is only reserved for so few these days that it's a highly unrealistic goal that people shouldn't even have as the thing they want, right? Because there's a lot of markets out there. It's a big world. There's a lot of places for somebody to exist in that doesn't rely on that. But you have to know yourself. If you are the type of person in your day-to-day life that doesn't put the effort into doing anything out of just sheer laziness, this is not for you. This industry is not for you.
Hello, you beautiful music creatives. My name is Mac Boris. I'm the founder of Musician Guidance, and it is my privilege to officially welcome you all to the Musician Guidance podcast. Our guest today is a multi-Grammy nominated and Brit Award winning producer, mixer, songwriter, artist, and recording engineer who has worked with Stormzy, Anne-Marie, Jay-Z, and many more legendary artists. His work is also behind over 10 billion streams, huge sync placements, and platinum sales certifications. I'm super excited to announce that he is also the newest addition to the Musician Guidance team, joining our mentors to offer you guidance to help you reach the next level in your career. Without further ado, it is my honor to welcome Bryan Wilson, who also goes by Boom Dice, to the podcast. Bryan, you're looking great. How are you doing today?
Thank you, sir. Good. I'm very happy to be doing this with you, and thanks for the nice introduction. It's a beautiful day, as you can see from my background here. Here, and
well, I appreciate you taking the time
I'm excited to drop some useful bombs for people here.
Heck yeah, and right from the beach. I appreciate you taking time out of the gorgeous day, and you could be surfing to join us and drop some pearls of wisdom.
That's right. That's right.
And as I just touched on, we've introduced you as our newest mentor. For those that maybe haven't, been blessed by your music yet or come across yourself, can you give a little background on yourself and I guess your journey to get to where you are today?
Yeah, well, I've always kind of been doing music in some shape or form since I was a kid, and kind of, I guess, the natural progression was from playing in different instruments, violin as a kid. Then when that was no longer cool and I met marijuana, I got turntables, I got myself drums. There was a lot of different musical influences for me. I was just a general music fan. Didn't know what it was. If it was good in the genre, I would be into it. Lots of pop, lots of rap, dance, lots of salsa, jazz, and the drum world, stuff like that. And the natural progression was to then go and try to figure out how all these records that I loved were being made. When I was 19, I left Toronto, which is where I'm from originally, and I moved to the UK, and I went to Paul McCartney's school in Liverpool and studied sound technology there, which was great because you got to do a whole ton of different things. But I always knew I wanted to be a studio guy. So the other stuff was fun, live sound for film, but it wasn't really me. And after that, I sort of naively thought that I could just come back to Toronto and there might be a studio job somewhere. But at the time in 2008 or 9 or something, there was really only a handful of great pro commercial studios around Toronto.
Right.
So you can imagine a stack of resumes of people that were probably more experienced than me at the time. So before I left Liverpool, I just went straight down to London and knocked on the doors of Abbey Road, Rack Studios, all of these, Olympic at the time, a bunch of them that are gone now, unfortunately. But I just sort of found who the studio managers were that I needed to speak to, and made all my contacts over in the UK. Anyway, fast forward 18, 19 years later, I've just come back to Toronto from London about 5-6 months ago. So got my foot in the door in the UK. You have to go where
Right.
it's, that's the path. And if you want it bad enough, throw your whole existence up and go do something crazy like that, because the UK was great to me.
Yeah.
Here in the intro, that's what the UK has done for me. So,
Well, welcome back to Canada, and I'm sure Canada will be hopefully quite good to you as well. And
Yeah,
also,
I hope so.
hey, I don't know if we can compete with some of those, legendary studios you were mentioning, but we'll do our best. But I appreciate you,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I know you're also known as a finisher in the industry because you get the
That's right.
job done at
Yeah.
any stage. I see a lot of artists, and I know you do too, that either don't know when to stop and they sometimes put in too much and it becomes messy, or on the other side of the spectrum, they don't have a vision for their project and thus they never start. Could you share some tips and strategies on
Yeah.
how you approach completing projects at any stage?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, coming from, let's say, the behind the glass side of it first, you have to know your skill set first and foremost. I'd say you have to know, what your client or what the artist is looking for wearing any given hat,
Right.
and make sure that you can interpret that correctly in a way that you can actually provide value within that framework, right? So if you're an
Hmm.
engineer only, or a mixer or producer or songwriter, whatever it is you're doing, you have to have confidence in your skill set, because if you don't know what you're doing and you go in there all cocky saying I'm a producer and you don't know what any of the stuff is in any studio in the world, you're going to probably lose out on that job, plus maybe get a bad
Right.
reputation or whatever it is. Confidence on your skill set without cockiness is an absolute must. Um, because at the end of the day as well, you're spending so much time in a recording studio with an artist, producers, engineers, session musicians, whoever it is, even label people. You need to have the right attitude, right? Because if people don't want to hang out with you, then the
Yeah.
session will be wrapping up pretty quick.
Yeah.
um, I would say that's generally what I do. Obviously, it's become sort of second nature when an artist sends me a song. I kind of dig into the multiple layers of the things that I can help with, since I wear a lot of different hats. That's by design. I've tried to formulate my career based on somebody who is a bit of a chameleon and can work in different genres, and execute at a high level no matter what it is. You have to be able to communicate, to listen. Obviously, technical prowess are very important, but you know, it's really, in my experience, often down to the attitude that you have.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I was talking to someone else and it was just like exactly what you're saying. And I love how you said confidence, not cockiness, so important. But as you touched on there, it's like at the end of the day, is this someone that you would like to go to the Philippines with and have a beer with on the beach? You know what I mean? Is this
That's
someone?
right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome advice. Let's say for those that maybe don't so let's go on the other side now, not the ones behind the glass. Let's go the other side there. That again don't know, don't have a clear vision for it, or just don't know when to stop. They sometimes they're so involved in it that they'll stay up late just working and working and working, and because they're listening and working so
Yeah.
closely to it, they're always adding stuff. And what would your advice be to them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is difficult because I still, to this day have clients that, let's use the scenario of an artist working on their tracks. The reason they employ somebody, a third party, to mix something is to relinquish this control because they can't get it right themselves. In theory, that's the
Right.
idea. But oftentimes you get these artists who micromanaged the process so much that they really have been living with like a demo, for example, for so long that they if after your initial take you're on revision, I don't know, 3, 4 or something, and you're like, I feel like they're just trying to peel it back towards what their demo was like that they've been living with for 3 years, you
Right.
know. And in which case I'm like, okay, well, I got your money, which is fine, but like that's not the point of this process.
Right. Right.
You know, so whatever it is, Mac, I'm telling you, this is a universal, all these, any artists I've worked with almost 15, 20, almost 20 years or so, um, a lot of them, when they're new to whatever it is they're trying for the first time, uh, need to make the errors themselves. They don't want to listen to people that have seen it 100,000 times,
Right.
even though later on realize that there is a pattern to certain behaviors. So for whatever reason, they need to discover it on their own to realize that, oh, actually, I should have listened in the first place, right?
Right.
That's not an industry issue. This is a creative industry shared experience, right? So I may have gone on a tangent.
No, I think
I forgot what you were asking.
no, I mean, I was asking about the kind of tips to,
Right.
for those that, are either don't know when to stop or don't know how to start. And I think you answered
Yeah.
it very well. And it's obviously worked for yourself. Um,
Yeah.
and not just in one style. You mentioned there earlier, listening to what the client wants, and also, failing, right? And learning from that.
Yeah.
And with that, you have this incredible career, almost 20 years, you said. You've worked across many genres, which I think is super important for, producers and up and coming creatives to know, because in an industry that's changing every day, the more you can do, the more you're worth and the more opportunities that you're going to get. So I think it's very important for them to build up their, strengths. And as someone that's done
Yeah.
that, how do you adapt? Is it all about listening? But or like, I guess, so how do you adapt your creative and technical approach when working on projects with different musical styles?
Well, it's a lot to do with psychology as well, right? Like being, as I kind of touched on before, you have to be a bit of a chameleon. Like
Hmm.
forget about the context of creativity in the technical field, right? Okay, in the studio setting. And it all depends on how you want to structure your business, because there's plenty of engineers out there who are like, oh, I only do rock, I don't care
Right.
about anything else. It's like, well, okay, you're going to be pigeonholed into that. For me, because I didn't want to be pigeonholed and knew that I liked different things and could do different things, that was the way to expand your horizons and actually make a business out of it. So the more things that you notch under your belt, the more you're able to kind of dip in and out as an engineer, a songwriter, a producer, a mixer, whatever it is, because you
Absolutely.
have to imagine you as a rapper, for example, gets lumped into a polka session. All right. Everybody knows just by that random example that that won't work.
Right.
Right. And the reason is because each side doesn't necessarily have all of the background to understand the music, to understand the communication behind it, understand the little nuances that make it that genre. So being a fan, I think it definitely has that, because that's what makes people comfortable with you being around it at the end of the day, right?
Right. Yep.
And I've worked really hard at doing that, and that's why you can go from rap to dance to pop to doing an indie band or whatever, and
Right.
still, get through that process.
Absolutely. So let's turn back the years a bit. You're obviously very experienced in it now and very successful. When you were starting out and experimenting with new genres and styles, I know there are many artists that and producers that suffer with imposter syndrome, or maybe don't know their
Yeah,
worth and are scared
yeah,
to to offer service in a genre or style that maybe they don't believe they could provide the best results in. Is that something that you struggled with, and how did you overcome it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a definitive answer to like to how to get over it. It's just by doing, right? Like the when you discover that you can do a certain thing, or you do it enough times, or you're in the environment enough times, that sort of fear or discomfort, I guess, becomes you can then be confident that you can do
Right.
it. It's still like it still happens. Everyone's got, one of my major problems was a real good stretch of a number of years there where I had high successful um, projects that with accolades and plaques. And
Mhm.
I realized like I kind of at that point had lost the love for why I got into it. And I was just hunting names, you
Right.
know, and everyone around me in central London, for example, everyone's like, no one has conversations. They just say, oh, what are you working on? Who are you working with? What are you doing? It was like fiendish behavior for the credits and the accolades
Right.
only,
Right.
right? Whether it was fun or not, whether you're killing yourself working overnight
Yeah.
for months, didn't matter. You're getting a name behind you, right?
Yeah.
And that was what I realized I had kind of fallen into. And things like that, I think it kind of gets dangerous too, because the imposter syndrome, or not, that's the wrong phrase, but when you're, let's say, doing nothing or working with a new act, you're like, oh my God, this is not going to go anywhere. It's like, the opposite. But
Yeah.
to on the flip side, coming up, one of the things is recognizing where you're at in your career. Aiming high is great. You should always do that, and you should always have plans to implement those steps. But you also have to be real. So in my case, before I got into it professionally, yes, I was a producer. Yes, I was making beats in my parents' basement. Yes, I was playing stuff, but I wasn't really working with anyone in a professional sense because I didn't know how. I didn't know where to begin.
Right.
So I thought, I've got a seriously big gap to fill here before I can really go around and feel like I can say I'm this, I'm that.
Mhm.
And so that's when I discovered like engineering for me was the way to get in. It's
Okay.
build up the names, build up the legitimacy, learn the craft, and then you take all of those things and you go the long route to then back to your initial goals, right? And that
Right.
is different for everyone in terms of length, but I think for me it's been a kind of tried and proven method. Every few years, push the reset button, reanalyze what your goals are, make sure you're not falling into a trap or getting sort of sidetracked, and
Mhm.
you know it's all about reflection and putting in the steps to you know
Absolutely. And the long road or journey, whatever you want to call it, as you kind of touched on there, is so important because with attention spans like shorter than ever, if you get this quick success, or you maybe work with a client,
yeah,
like it might be a hit, but one hit wonders, are a thing, and people do forget who you are if you haven't built up this catalog and stuff like that. So putting in
right,
the work at the beginning and going through that longer journey is going to benefit you, you know, over time. Whenever I say like put in the work now, I always get so much hate because our musicians, producers, artists, they all feel like they're putting in the work now. They all feel like they've been putting in the work for 10 years and they're still not where they
yeah,
want to be.
yeah,
And I sympathize with them over that. I also think that it's putting the work into the wrong areas and it's working hard or extensively, but maybe not as smart as
right,
they could be. And I say that with what you just said there. You went over to engineering because you found what I'll call a gap in the market for it, or a way to kind of get your foot in the door. I don't exactly know where I'm going with this question, but do you have any advice on ways for artists or producers to get their name out there? Because right now there are millions of, music creatives kind of doing the same thing, all wanting to achieve the same goal, but because they're doing the same thing, no one is really standing out. And the few that do stand out, you see them start to gain that traction. I know that's a broad question. I know that's just kind of putting you on the spot there, but or do you feel like maybe I'll just leave it open and I'll let you kind of run with that. How can artists kind of get their foot
Yeah.
in the door these days?
Well, I can't really speak for other sort of, producers or in the A&R capacity, or because I've found that I've had to develop a method that is, when you're on the come up, people are willing to help you if they like you and you've done them favors and stuff. But in my experience, unfortunately, when you start kind of matching or surpassing your peers, they all disappear as a useful mentor, so to speak. And that's why I now offer that sort of service, because this is what I do in my studio sessions anyway.
Right.
So it's a bit of a natural extension, but standing out, I mean, this is the eternal question, right? Because it's very cliche to say you got to be different, right? But what does that mean? Because if everyone knew what it meant, then there'd be a lot more popular artists available to everyone.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean, like, what surprises me is getting signed to a major is the ticket, right? Whereas most of my experience of major label projects, those people get dropped. It's not the same thing as it used to be in the 80s, 90s, maybe even early 2000s. There's a lot more outlets there. The thing is, there's so much stuff that artists can be doing for absolutely no money now. You can be your own designers, you can be your own managers, everything, right? You don't need this dream of that a lot of people have of being discovered and scooped up, and then you're off to the races, is only reserved for so few these days that it's a highly unrealistic goal that people shouldn't even have as the thing they want, right? Because there's a lot of markets out there. It's a big world. There's a lot of places for somebody to exist in that doesn't rely on that. But you have to know yourself. If you are the type of person in your day-to-day life that doesn't put the effort into doing anything out of just sheer laziness, this is not for you. This industry is not for you. And I don't really waste time trying to convince somebody otherwise, because how I hunt for my artists is completely based on that. If you're not doing anything, then we're not having a conversation, and unfortunately, I've even on my label side with art, have a good game temporarily and then hope that sends them off to the races, and then they're just whatever. They just fall by the wayside of the other million people who can sing well and look good,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's sad, but it's true. Yeah.
Yeah. It's harsh out there, but you have to take rejection. You have to know if you've got what it takes to continue even through 5 years or more of sideways movement,
Yeah. And
so
go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, so yeah.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah.
You touched on a few things there that I want to dive into. Before we do, though, what do you say we switch gears a bit and do a little quick fire round?
Sure. Does it involve money?
For the sake of the
Okay,
podcast, I'll say
right.
yes, but if you ask me for
right.
it afterwards, you might not get a reply. So I've got 10 questions here for you. Just one-word answers as quickly as you can.
All right.
Okay. Vinyl or digital music?
Vinyl.
Favorite piece of studio equipment?
Distressor.
Interesting. Dream collaboration, living or deceased?
Michael Jackson.
Right on. Best concert you've attended?
AC/DC.
Favorite music genre to produce?
R&B.
I feel like I got you to like. I feel like that's a tough question, making you pick between
Yeah,
children, basically.
yeah, yeah.
One song that's been stuck in your head recently?
Um, Wheels on the Bus from my baby.
That's fair.
Yeah,
Coffee or tea in the studio?
coffee.
Most played track on your playlist right now? Wheels on the Bus. No.
Yeah, basically anything. There's I mean, it's not a commercially released track, but there is some banging children's channel called Hey Bear.
Okay.
Uh, they've just got fantastic instrumental tracks, and I
Right.
just play all day.
I'm gonna check it out after this.
Yeah, do it.
I got two more for you. Favorite city or venue to perform in?
I've never performed.
If you were though, what would be your favorite city to perform in?
Ooh, I feel like Red Rocks in Colorado would be pretty awesome.
I would definitely agree with that. And last question. If you could time travel, which musical era would you visit?
Probably the 80s.
Well, congratulations. You just completed the quick fire round. You will get
Thank you.
your
Thank you.
e-transfer after this.
Okay, great. I like that a lot because you never I really gave you the top
Yeah.
of the noggin answers there, which even surprised me. And if I think anyone who knows me would be also surprised that that doesn't really represent what they know of me. But
Right. That's what's fun about it. And
yeah, that's
since
what
you
happens.
exactly, and since you gave that answer, Wheels on the Bus, it's been playing in my head. It's too catchy.
Yeah, I know.
So when you
These
see me,
things, I'm telling you, Mac, children's songs are, I mean, they're absolute
yeah,
bangers.
they are.
Like these are the original pop tracks,
Hmm.
and you can just look at Baby Shark as a modern example of
Yeah.
a monster and that just has grabbed everybody.
What does that have? Like 13, maybe more billion views on YouTube?
Probably,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Yeah, we work with an artist that is into children's music, and like I listen to it. Like it's good. Like
Yeah, yeah,
exactly what you're saying. Yeah, it's
yeah.
so
And
I mean,
from the business, you have to know about all this stuff from the business perspective. Like
absolutely.
there's
Yeah.
a big difference between being an artist, an aspiring artist in one genre who has tunnel vision on that, or a producer or whatever,
Hmm.
versus someone who actually has created a music business around this and knows all of the happenings within it, because
Yeah.
that's how you tap into. You never know where your next opportunity is coming from. You
Very
know.
true. That's brilliant advice. So true. Yep. And so before we went into that quick fire round, you mentioned a few
Yeah.
things that I wanted to dive into. So you're the founder of Boom Dice Presents, sorry, in which you're actively involved in discovering and shining a spotlight on new international talent. You were touching on, your A&R approach there and what you look for in artists. You mentioned the work ethic. Can you dive into that a little more? Because there is this big pool of
Yeah.
artists. How do you kind of, pick which ones are ones that you'd like to work with?
Well, it's a little bit of research because unfortunately, a lot of people make great music,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of talented people out there that aren't doing anything about it. And as a label, or in the A&R sense, wearing my production hat, who I choose to work with, or who we want to do releases with, it's really just based on basic research, which includes, can I find you online everywhere that I
Right.
look? Can I understand the type of artist that you are and what your output is? Is it obvious that you're doing something and have been for an extended period of time? On the flip side, I find development really exciting because you can basically do whatever you want with a new artist, but does that artist then have goals? Are they implementing the steps? Is their music up to commercial standards in whatever genre you think you're going up against?
Mm.
Um, do you have the right attitude? Can you handle rejection? Are you capable of working with somebody? Like, all of these things are skirting around the fact that you need to have talent and skill. But if I can't get a sense of that, or a sense of what I could do with you as a collaboration, and not just on the side of, like, playing the label and coming up with marketing campaigns and outsourcing to Facebook, Instagram marketing, TikTok marketing, is, outside of all of that, if you don't
Right.
have those basic principles, then there's no point, because then at that point, you're then just an artist coming to me to try to work for free. Right. And so when I realize that, and I go through my sort of personal checklist, there's five. I always tell people there's 5 or more different ways to work together, because if you're an artist who's like, hey, I want you to produce my track, and maybe we can release it on your label, for example. I don't have that much experience with this, doing the label thing is new as of, I think, 2020. So it's only a few years, but you learn a lot by doing, as I've said,
Right. Yep.
before. And at that point, if somebody wants all of these things, but I can't recognize anything within the tick list of what I just went through, at that point, then I'll just ask you to pay me my rates to get the thing done that it is that you want to do. Right.
Yep.
So there's a massive difference between the people who just want to do a single job, or the people that you connect with that have a vision for themselves, or, and it's not as easy to execute that either, because I've been involved with a lot of artists, even songwriters, producers, and connecting people together that talk a good game, but when it comes to it, they want the free ride, or they don't do anything about it. And it's like, okay, well, what happened to all of the things that you said you wanted, right? And now you can't even spend time to, like, be creative enough to do your own music video, or, and music videos, I mean, who knows what's going to happen with that? Like, I don't even know if people watch that. MTV doesn't even play music videos anymore, but there's other ways to do it, and that's why it's exciting, is because those things are free. TikTok is free. Let me tell you a perfect example. This just came to mind.
Let's hear it.
2015, roughly, there was a fantastic artist just outside of London in Essex. His name was Ryder, and I started working with him in his parents' shed in the back. And he had come from a metal background, but he was then doing, like, soul. We were kind of doing soul pop, trying to folk pop stuff, trying to figure out, like, where it's going to go, because he's got just belting pipes, amazing voice.
Oh yeah.
And he was so non-confident in himself that it really was like a drain on both of us, I think, because it didn't matter what I said about, guiding the performance, and all of these things that normally work just weren't working. Anyway, he was obsessed with doing an album, so he took me to Nashville with him, and we had a beautiful whiskey fused and fueled time making an album in some guy's living room. And fast forward, so that was maybe 2015, 2016. Fast forward a few years, put out a couple of EPs, never put out the album that we did. And along came TikTok during that period, right? So then, and he basically had disappeared, didn't know what he wanted to do. And I thought, okay, just another example of, like, failed talent, so to speak, or not failed, but misused talent. Right. The reason that I bring this up is because in lockdown, all he would do is post TikToks of him singing.
Yeah.
And just did that long haul thing. Anyway, fast forward, he's signed, I think, to Parlophone in the UK. He's played with Dave Grohl. He's played with Queen. He's or the remaining members of Queen. He's performed at the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. He's got 5+ million followers. He was the Eurovision representative for the UK this past year or last year.
Yeah.
You name it, off to the races, because he found his thing, and
Yeah.
that set him up for ultimately what he wanted 5 years prior.
Yeah, he's absolutely killing it. I remember
Yeah.
I came across him, I want to say,
Oh, you know him.
I do know him. I came across him
Okay, good.
I think it was it was either Instagram or TikTok. And
Right.
this was probably 2 years ago even, so a decent amount of time ago.
Yeah.
And I remember just seeing these clips of him. I can't remember if it was Instagram,
Yeah.
TikTok, or both, but he's just singing. And I knew nothing about the guy. All I would see are these short clips of him singing. I just remember being, wow, like this guy has a voice. He is
Yeah.
amazing. But I knew nothing about this bloke. So knowing that
Yeah.
I saw that earlier that you worked with him, and I thought that was so cool.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
so
I mean, he's just such a talented dude, and he's just off to the races now, you
yeah.
know. I never know who knows. It's strange for me to come back to my home now because a lot of my credits are UK based,
Right.
but or US based. And this back and forth, you know, for example, almost zero people around me know who Sofi Tukker is in the UK. However, when I go to LA, Sofi Tukker's like
Yeah.
one of the biggest up and coming things going. So you never know um
Yeah.
who knows what, but there you go. TikTok tells you who's who.
TikTok tells. Yeah. That's the era of empowerment. You're like you
Yeah,
touched on. You can do this for
yeah,
free.
right.
So
And so there's no excuse really. Like if you want it bad enough, you find there's so many creative ways to do it. I mean,
mhm.
TikTok's so entertaining. I don't even watch TV, but I watch TikTok, you know. So
Yeah.
make it a part of your strategy. Do something fun with it, you know,
Yeah.
around your music.
Absolutely. I think there's a fine line too between pivoting. So you
Yeah,
could be doing something that's not working. And I think kind of Sam is that example of that. Not so much
right.
that it wasn't working, but it wasn't what maybe he wanted to do, or well, I don't know exactly the whole story there, but he pivoted in a sense, and he found TikTok and
Yep.
Instagram. And there's a fine line between knowing when to pivot, but also continuing to do whatever it is for an extended period of time, because you're never going to get that overnight success. At least 99.9% of
Yeah.
people aren't going to get that instant success. It is going to take time, a lot of the time, years of doing it, but it
Yeah.
is looking at the feedback, looking at what people are saying, and pivoting from it. And that goes
Right.
back to what I touched on earlier. You can work hard and you can put in a lot of hours, but you might not progress. And it's just because you have to listen, you have to pivot, and you have to make changes that are actually that I mean, at the end of the day, that people want to see. Like, but then at the same time, don't pivot all the time. Pivot, put lots of
Yeah.
time into it, put energy into it,
Right.
and I
You have to give
promise
it a good go.
you have to give it a good go. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And I
I
think I mean that's I'm
go
sorry, go
no
ahead.
no go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I think that's just perfect advice for the changing landscape
Yeah.
of music, right? Because that's always going to be an answer.
Yeah. Yeah. We answered that
You know?
question. I was going to ask that later, but I think we just
Yeah.
hit the nail on the head right there with
Right.
it.
Well, yeah, there it is.
Yeah. I want to go back to a question I asked earlier, which is basically, what do you look for in artists? Um, on the flip side, what can artists do to show you that they do have the work ethic, that they are dedicated, so that they have been releasing music for years, let's say, that they do have their social like links updated and all that? Beyond that though, like how do they show you across, I guess, like social media, that they are somebody that um is, at least in their eyes, ready for that next step of being, discovered?
Yeah, so if I'm not looking at it from the analytical point of view of like a producer as to or a writer as to who I want to work with on that sides of things, if I'm like, you know, scouting, trying to scout somebody to connect with an artist that I know or a songwriter, and I need to do that sort of tick list or levels of research. What I would normally do is I'll search for all of those things on my own. So if I can find you everywhere, I'll look at everything.
Okay.
I'll just to see, like, okay, are you active on a, there's no reason that you can't, if you're posting to one of them, there's no reason you can't copy and paste the same post to all of them on the same time, right? And I'm not saying that's a big deal. It just shows me the level of dedication in one aspect of your career, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's your online presence. That's your tool to sell yourself, right? And I get that it sucks and it's boring. We all hate it, but you know what? That's how you get your next job, right? Or that's how you find a live. Are you performing live? Would be my next question. When I reach out to people, I'm like, hey, I love that little video, but you only have 4 posts and a couple hundred followers. That doesn't turn me off like it would like a major label, because I still am somebody who values talent.
Right.
So, and it takes very little effort to ask a couple of extra questions.
Mm-hmm.
Are you performing? What are your 6 months goals now? How much music do you have in the pipeline? Do you have a playlist? Do you have a one sheet that tells me all of your achievements, no matter how big or small right now?
Yep.
There's a deeper dive after the fact of when you're presented with one thing. Do you understand the package? Because there's a lot of artists who just are present online, but they're just singing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I can't do anything with that because that's not really the business that I'm in. Unless you want to pay me to do your music, I can do that. But in order for me to spend the time, effort, and energy, even in some cases funding, to work with you and put you on with the boom dice seal of approval, so to speak, I need to see that stuff. It's like, trying to say that that's a good example. Like, say that you're a lawyer and you've never done law before, right? Like, I mean, that's a dumb example, but you know what I mean. You have to, if I can palette that and understand the package, the complete package, there's something that can be worked with there, I think.
Right. Okay. And so let's continue with that. So let's say, and speaking on Boom Dice Presents, let's say you come across an artist that fulfills everything you're looking for. You start working with them, but then, as you touched on earlier, some people are, I'll just say, great at selling themselves, for lack of a better term, but aren't able to keep accountable to what they said, basically. I might have just answered that, which I didn't really. I'm sure you have more to share on that, but like, are they doing, and I'm speaking very generally here again, but are you seeing any common things that artists that maybe are new to the business, right, aren't as seasoned, haven't been rejected, I'll say, as many times yet, and are maybe feeling a little more entitled? Are there things between them you're seeing that are just hindering them from landing that next opportunity or reaching the next level with their music?
100%. There is something that really pisses me off often.
Okay.
That is, I come across so much, and I can frame this in so many different ways. It's one of those things that I said before, where artists need to learn it themselves and go through it for some whatever mind-based reason is the problem behind it. But it's artists that think they've created something precious enough to hold on to, when really, in the grand scheme of things, they haven't done anything yet. And what I mean by that is artists thinking that they need to hold on to certain songs because they're going to be hits, or thinking they need to be precious about protecting something that literally no one even cares about yet.
Yeah.
it's like a mental thing. I think it's like an ego and an image thing they think is being portrayed out there, but in reality, there's no business yet. It hasn't started, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know what that is, but it's like people, not artists, not they don't often don't want to try new things. It's really difficult to get, even from the A&R perspective, to get an artist who's an R&B artist to then go top line a dance banger, right? Because they're like, oh well, is it going to appear on my Spotify profile? Is it going to, confuse people as to what I really am doing out there? Is it, they don't try new things. And
Right.
as somebody who's got to where they are by saying yes to everything, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, do you have a business or do you not? You don't go out to, as a installer of some type of materials and pick and choose the jobs, doing a shack versus a mansion, right? Because you're doing the same thing, but you gotta, why would you say no? It doesn't make sense. Everything leads to a new opportunity. So that's one thing that really bothers me, is the hard-headedness of artists not wanting to try anything new, or something that might give them more exposure before they even have anything off the ground.
I think that kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier in self-doubt, kind of overthinking, and and maybe a little bit of not knowing their worth, or stuff like that. But I think it comes down to, how badly do you want this? Like, are you willing to try something that could fail, where you could, get some bad publicity from, and stuff like that? Are you willing to try to do that for, those goals that you're wanting to reach at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that's the number one thing I come across. Everything else I can kind of push to the side, but that to me is the number one hindrance to
Yeah.
people. And I'm not saying it's a solution to then pop off. I'm just saying the more exposure. I mean, if you're featured on a hit, like, how is that a downside to your career, right? Like,
And
I don't know if it's people being scared or what, but
yeah, I that's what I think it comes down to. Them, again, being scared, maybe not knowing their worth and experimenting in something, or just like overthinking, not knowing what potentially could come from it, and thinking of all the bad
yeah,
scenarios rather than the
yeah,
good.
yeah.
And
Right.
what I would say is, like, I know in the past I've done things like that, where I've taken a leap of faith, where it's like, I'm probably just wasting, an hour, a week, a month of my life, whatever. I'll learn something from it. I'll try and have fun with it, for it to turn into the best decisions I've taken, because it's
Yeah,
been
right.
something that's opened me to this new market, or this new
Yep,
idea that I
yep,
wouldn't have been able to tap into, had that opportunity not presented itself, and had I not
yep,
taken that leap of faith. So I
right.
think, in general, I feel like I'm speaking so general for a lot of this, but in general, I think more good would come from it than the potential of bad, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
100%.
So yeah.
I always tell people who get excited, they're like, gosh, I can't even tell you the amount of times they're like, oh, this, you go to LA, this A&R is saying this, that I'm going to get in this session, and that songwriter, and blah, blah, blah. And I always say, I've been disappointed so many times myself, that I say, okay, great.
Yeah.
If it's a viable lead, get excited when it's done, when
Right.
it's already happened, right? Because then it's locked in and it's part of your story moving forward. Anything else, you're wasting emotional effort, uh, because there's so many flakes out there, right?
Mhm.
It's not, um, you have to get excited about the right thing, but keep your head down and continue to do what you're doing. Because if you truly are, in fact, getting those butterflies and people swirling around what you're doing, that means you're doing something interesting.
Totally agree. I'm been nodding my head throughout this, and it's not because I'm listening to Wheels on the Bus. It's because I totally agree with
Yeah.
you.
Your headphones, actually, it's not my voice, it's the Wheels on the Bus song. That's
Hey,
that's what
that's
you're
between
listening.
us. That's between us.
Yeah.
No, I'm totally kidding. I really appreciate the insight you're sharing.
Yeah.
And we've been diving into some much needed topics, but some ones that are on the little more serious side. As we approach the end of this podcast, let's end it on a fun or more of a lighthearted moment. Throughout your career, I know that you have some stories. You've worked with some pretty prominent artists. Can you give us a glimpse into some lighthearted side of the business or story that you've experienced? Does anything kind of come to mind that you can share?
Lighthearted. Well, I'll tell you.
Or funny or just cool?
Yeah, I mean, one of the coolest things that I'd say, I mean, unexpected. Well, there's something that's funny, which is one of my first sessions was the first when I moved to the UK. It was the first Florence and the Machine album, and under I was shadowing Paul Epworth's assistant at the time. And for those of you out there who are unsure of who he was off to the races after producing Adele. And Florence asked one of the only things I remember there outside of soaking it in like a sponge was Florence nonstop spinning around the room and sending me out to go get her toothbrushes because the sessions were so long. But that's when I realized right at the beginning that you're not always going to just get the opportunity to do the fun shit.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good. You're good. Don't worry.
And when I first started, I was cleaning toilets, mopping floors, serving people tea, you name it.
Right.
But anyway, that was a little bit of a funny kind of introduction to the business. But one of the, I'd say, most unexpected things, I was once in Liverpool doing a front of the sound for a Brazilian samba show in front of house, trying to see if a side gig for me could be live sound a little bit.
Okay.
And in an empty auditorium, so we're practicing the show, and the door is right behind me, and I look back and I see Paul McCartney walk through, and completely empty auditorium, and he goes and he sits right in the middle, puts his legs up, puts his arms up, listens to the rehearsal. I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I have no idea because I'm like, oh, right. Shit, that's McCartney's right in the middle of this. Like, what the hell is he doing here? And anyway, he got up afterwards, came and shook my hand, said, nice work, kid. And, wow. Bounced after it. And I just sat there like, wow. I don't think I've ever, out of all the people that I've worked with, I don't think you can really get a better, more successful example of music business and popular culture in your presence. I don't think you can. There's very few modern examples of somebody like him, but
absolutely,
that was pretty cool for me.
Pretty cool. Yeah, to underplay. That's insane. That's sweet. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, Bryan, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting. You've shared some incredible insight, and I would like to let those listening in know that they can schedule a consulting call with yourself. The link will be below. I'll also have all of Bryan's links below so you can check out his stuff and show him some love. Bryan, is there anything else you would like to say?
That's it. I'm available. If anyone out there wants to connect on anything from contracts to EQ techniques to, revenue streams, royalty streams, whatever it is, I'm accessible now. Thanks to our friend Mac.
Thank you. But it's really thank you to you. We're super excited to have you part of the platform. And with that, That's going to conclude this episode. For you beautiful music creatives listening in, let Bryan be an inspiration to yourself that you can achieve your goals. I know many of you look in the mirror at night and maybe see a reflection of someone who isn't where you want to be. Please know that success comes after hardships and setbacks. I'm sure Bryan's experienced them. I know I sure have. Continue to work hard every day, even on the days when it's tough, because consistency is key and building positive habits is going to help you achieve that level of success that you're after. And once again, if you would like a little boost, connect with Bryan for one-on-one personalized mentoring. That link will be below. Until next time, I've been Mac, that's been Bryan, and you've been amazing. Take care and keep making music.